All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's study session for the Ohio Division Real Estate Salesperson Exam. My name is Michael Rapaski, and I'm the team leader and CEO of Keller Williams Greater Metropolitan, and very excited to have all of you with us here tonight. If you could, just as we get started, drop into the chat anything that you know you want to cover this evening. We usually get through about 2 or 3 sections of the CompuCram while we work through this. So Valentine wants to practice a real estate. We'll go ahead and start with that. I know a couple of you had reached out about real estate calculations and financing, so we'll throw that in the mix as well. Anything else that you want, just drop it in the chat. As we do every week, I'm going to read the question and all the possible answers. You guys drop in the chat box A, B, C, or D, whichever answer you think is correct. And then from there, we will have the opportunity to see if we got it right as a group. And if we did or didn't, we'll take a chance to explain some of the concepts along the way. All right, so question number 1, Marty, a real estate agent, has been trying to persuade his friend Bill to buy a house instead of renting. Marty suggests Bill just move out, as his landlord has the duty to mitigate the damages by trying to find another tenant. Bill moves out and purchases a property listed by Marty. Bill is sued by his former landlord, who wins a judgment for the unpaid portion of the lease. Whose fault is this? A, the property owner, B, Marty's, C, Bill's for breaking the lease, or D, Bill's landlord? Marty's the real estate agent. Bill is the tenant. All right, so we got some B's and C's in the chat box. Looks like we have a couple more C's than B's, so we'll go with that. And it is actually going to be Marty's. And the key here is that he induced him into breaking a contract to induce the sale. Now, ultimately, if Bill does this of his own free will and accord, then the recourse would be with Bill only. But since Marty induced, encouraged, and led him to that, Bill could come back on Marty and hold him accountable for that. If that inducement is not there, if Bill just does that of his own decision making with no encouragement or inducement, then it would just be Bill's for breaking the lease. All right, question number 2. A listing agent notices the property she is listing needs some cosmetic attention. Rather than bother the seller with the chore of cleaning and making minor repairs, she advises the owner to list lower than market value to get a quick sale. Property is on the market for several months, and now the listing agent is offering the seller a list price offer. The agent has the house cleaned, makes some minor repairs. The agent then sells the property for a profit of 25%. So has there been a violation in this execution? A, yes, the agent is self-dealing. B, no, the agent is taking advantage of an opportunity. C, no, the seller could have done the repairs and cleaned. Or D, no, the agent is doing the best thing for the owner. So this one, agent offers a lower list price, doesn't recommend improvements, then buys lower, makes the improvements, and sells for a profit. All right, so seeing A's in the chat, we'll go with that, and that's correct. You're obligated to advise the best listing price, and the way that we would teach you is just, always make sure you're giving options to your seller and allowing them to make the decision. And additionally, you would want to disclose, hey, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to list it at this. If you want to do that, I can help you do that. And disclosing what your intent is. Otherwise, you could be guilty of self-dealing. So transparency is key there, as an agent who has additional knowledge to what's going on with the market and what would be best to sell a property. So in that last question, completely legal if you're like, hey, make these repairs. And they're like, we don't want to. Okay, list it lower. And then you say, hey, I'm going to buy this and make the repairs. And if they're like, yeah, cool, go for it. And you do it, then you're fine, as long as you're disclosing that. Question number 3, a real estate agent presents a full price cash offer with no contingencies during an initial listing period. The seller refuses to sign the contract because he does not like the buyers. What is correct? A, the listing agent will most likely be due a commission. B, no commission can be due unless there's a closing. C, the buyer could sue for specific performance. Or D, the listing contract will be automatically terminated. So A's in the chat box, and A's are going to be correct. Although the sellers are not obligated to accept an offer, contract with the broker will most likely obligate them to pay a commission because the broker has done what they were hired to do, which is deliver a ready, willing, and able buyer. While this is the letter of the law and how the question should be answered, it is unlikely, right? And all the dealings that I have seen from my perch in this industry, very few times is it appropriate to sue your seller, or will we as a brokerage do that? You'll want to advise them to take the best offer, to not discriminate or discern amongst the buyers. Consider the offers, not the buyers. They're putting themselves in a lot of risk in terms of, if there's potential fair housing violations or anything else associated with their decision not to sell. But it's unlikely. While you may be legally and contractually obligated to a commission, it's unlikely that you're going to get this one in this situation regardless. All right, question number 4. The difference between fraud and misrepresentation is that A, fraud is unintentional while misrepresentation is intentional. B, fraud is an intentional misrepresentation while misrepresentation is unintentional. C, there's no difference. Or D, a buyer can recover only compensatory damages from fraud. So what's the difference between fraud and misrepresentation? A ton of B's in the chat box, and that's right. Fraud is when you know something to be some way and you say it to be another. You intentionally misrepresent the facts. While misrepresentation is typically held or typically comes up when you are in a situation where you don't actually know things to be a certain way, but represent them as a certain way, right? Is the basement dry? Well, if I don't know and I say yes, that's misrepresentation. If I know it's not dry and I say yes, that's fraud. The appropriate response there is, I don't know, I'll find out, right? If you don't know, just say you don't know. You're completely within the bounds of your role to not know things and say, that's a great question. Let me look into that for you. A broker who engages in commercial or residential property management must have a special property management trust account to receive security deposits, rents, and other funds from tenants. This account may earn interest. Who is the beneficiary of the interest on the rental receipts? A, the property manager earns the interest as a bookkeeping fee. B, the state. C, the property owner or owners. Or D, the tenants should receive a pro rata share of interest. Lots of C's in the chat box, and that is correct. Property management accounts can earn interest, right? Broker trust accounts for transaction and holding funds in escrow cannot. But the caveat to the property management funds is that they have to be allocated back to and distributed back to the parties to whom the money belongs, right? Because it's the property owner's money that the property management company is holding. So that's why they are due the interest. All right, an earnest money deposit, if any is offered, is usually given to the broker at the time of the sales contract is authorized by the offerer and presented to the offeree. Absent any contract contrary instructions in the sales contract, the broker has legal responsibility to A, deposit the earnest money in his operating account, B, hold the check in the transaction file until closing, C, put the check in the brokerage's fireproof safe, or D, deposit the check in the brokerage's special trust account. D is correct. Non-interest bearing special trust account is the lawful destination if not otherwise stated. So the trump is always going to be what is in the sales contract. That's going to be what you want to, what your focus, what you should do with the earnest money, as long as the contract does not say that it should be in your name and you should cash it, because you can't do that. All right, question number 7. A broker must keep all records of all funds received and dispersed from the brokerage special trust account, which does not need to be included in the record. A, dates of funds received, B, amounts received, C, check numbers and dates funds dispersed, or D, the client's social security number. So everything but D is going to be required. So D is not. You don't need to keep track of people's social security numbers. You do need to keep a proper ledger, which is when you received them, how much you received, and how and when you disperse them. All right, question number 8. A property manager opened an interest-bearing account in which he put rents and security deposits. Funds will also be paid out for contractors who perform building maintenance. Who gets the interest on the account? Same question, different way. A, listing broker, B, the owner, C, the listing broker and listing agent, or D, the tenant. B, the owner. All right, question number 9. Jim agrees to list his cousin's property. Jim shows a buyer client several properties, and the buyer client decides to make an offer on Jim's cousin's property. Jim declares dual agency. What else does he need to disclose? A, patent defects. B, that redlining is illegal. C, previous sale price of the property. Or D, the relation between the agent and the seller. All right, so it looks like the D's have it in the chat, and that's correct. When a dual agent has a material relationship to one party and not the other, that has to be disclosed. You're also required to disclose latent defects, not patent ones. And then redlining is when lenders discriminate, but it's not something that needs to be disclosed as a part of this deal. So dual agency, material relationships to one party and not the other needs disclosure. If a client's earnest money check upon being deposited in the broker's trust account is returned for insufficient funds, the broker should A, resign the agency, B, call the police, C, cover the bad check personally, or D, tell the cooperating broker that the bad check has bounced. D. As you may encounter this and it might not be with the check bouncing, but sometimes people submit a contract and they say, "Oh, I'm going to drop the earnest money off at the title company. Title company hasn't received it. Another day goes by, title company hasn't received it." The best thing you can do in this situation is keep everybody apprised at all times. So just a daily email, "Hey, checked in with the title company, no earnest money received yet. Hey, checked in with the title company, no earnest money received yet," right? You want to keep the cooperating broker informed of what's going on there, so that there isn't something 10 days later where you're like, "Oh yeah, they still haven't done it." And then you'll spoil more deals by avoiding transparency than you will with leaning into it. Commingling of funds refers to A, the deposit of client funds into a broker's operating account, B, employing realtors and non-realtors in the same office, C, cooperating with another broker in a transaction, or D, meeting with both brokers and sales associates present. A is correct. Commingling refers to mixing of funds when you take client funds and you put them into a broker's operating account. Conversion is when you take funds from the operating account, client funds from a broker's trust account, and use them for something that they are unintended for, like operating expenses. All right, question number 12. Robert ran a full-page ad to feature all of his listings. In one ad, Robert describes a property as being perfect for empty nesters. Robert's ad, A, will attract high-quality buyers, B, should please the owners, C, is likely to get a quick sale, or D, is potentially violating fair housing laws. All right, seeing lots of D's in the chat box here. And that's correct. The perception around this ad could be that there are no kids allowed, be a potential violation to familial status, which is covered under fair housing laws. Question number 13, when a buyer gives a salesperson, Sue, a check for $1,000 in earnest money deposit in a transaction, she deposited it in her special trust account. Can her client earn interest on the deposit? A, no, her broker deserves the interest. B, no, the account must be non-interest bearing. C, no, only brokers may have trust accounts. Or D, yes, an agent must always act in her client's best interest. Seeing some B's in the chat box, and it's actually going to be C. While B is true, these must be non-interest bearing accounts. The fact that Sue is a salesperson, she should not have a special trust account. That only exists at the brokerage level. You cannot receive earnest money checks in your name. You cannot have a special non-interest bearing trust account to deposit those said checks. It has to be in the broker's special trust account. Salespersons may not have those. Salesperson Sue has just completed a purchase and sale agreement with Bob, her client, in order to make an offer on a house. The agreement includes a good faith deposit of $5,000 in the form of a check, which Bob has given to Sue. Absent of special instructions in regard to Bob's check, Sue should, this is a tongue twister, A, give the check to her broker, deposit in the brokerage trust account once the seller has accepted the offer. B, deposit the check in her personal savings. C, turn it over to the broker immediately. Or D, give it to the seller to hold until closing. What should she do absent of instructions? So we got some C's. Go with C, and that is correct. So the rationale here, payment of a good faith deposit is due when the contract is formed, though it is not delivered to the seller unless the parties have agreed to. So sometimes you'll see that, hey, give the check to the seller, they can hold it in the event that they want to accept the offer. Since Sue is a sub-agent, her broker Bob is the actual agent. Her broker is the actual agent. She should give Bob's check to her broker and have it deposited in the brokerage's special trust account as soon as possible, unless her broker has given her written authorization to make deposits directly into the account, which yours will not. Salesperson should never hold clients' funds or deposit funds into a personal checking account. Any questions on that one? Because I know it reads, A and C read correctly, or sorry, read similarly. The difference is you just get it to the broker immediately. You want, which they both say, but this says once the seller has accepted the offer, you just want that, check out of your hand as soon as possible. If ultimately there is not an acceptance of the offer, the check's voided, no money's ever moved around, or there's just a check cut from the brokerage back to that client, but you want to get it to the broker immediately as a salesperson. And question number 15, by which system can real estate brokers share listings and commissions on listings sold jointly? Is it A, the PMI, B, the MLS, C, the MIP, or D, the APR? It is B, the multiple listing service. MIP is mortgage insurance premium, PMI is private mortgage insurance, and APR is annual percentage rate. All right, let's go back to the main page and we will hit some financing. That one was called out as one we wanted to hit tonight. Which is a document that uses real property to secure debt? A, a chattel mortgage, B, a promissory note, C, a trust deed, or D, a mortgage. Got some D's and B's in the chat. Looks like a couple more D's than B's. And that's going to be correct. So the promissory note is the instrument of obligation secured by the mortgage, with the homeowner pledging the real property as security for payment on the promissory note. Trustee deed is used to transfer property that a trustee is holding in a trust situation. And a chattel mortgage uses personal property, not real property, as collateral. So your mortgage is, when you give a mortgage to the bank, they're giving you money and you are buying land with that. And then that real property, that land or building, is used to secure the debt that you have assumed. A property description that uses natural monuments and markers and has a beginning and end at the same point is known as A, meets and bounds, B, government rectangular, C, lot and block, or D, recorded plat. Looks like the A's have it. And that's correct. Meets and bounds use natural monuments and always begin and end at the same point. After the borrower makes the last payment on a loan secured by a deed of trust, which instrument will the trustee use to revest the title to the borrower? Is it A, trustee deed, B, a limited warranty, C, a general warranty, or D, a reconveyance deed? All the D's in the chat, and that's correct. The reconveyance deed is what happens when the loan is paid in full in a title theory state to deliver the deed back to the borrower. Question number 4, a purchaser secured a loan using a deed of trust. Now that the borrower has defaulted on the loan, the trustee finds a buyer to sell the title to. Which instrument did the trustee use to convey title to the new owner? A, a trustee deed, B, a reconveyance deed, C, a quitclaim deed, or D, a deed of trust? All right, the A's are in the chat box, and the A's are correct. A deed of trust puts the title into a trust, where a reconveyance deed, we just went over what that does. And then when somebody is when you see that a trustee is involved to convey title, it's going to be the trustee deed. All right. One form of seller financing is A, non-conforming, B, land contract, C, lease purchase, or D, lease option. Which one represents a form of seller financing? B, land contract is correct. That is going to be the most common form of seller financing that you will hear. Question number 6, just 1 day prior to a foreclosure sale, the homeowner pays the bank all of the past due payments, late charges, and attorney fees. The homeowner saves the property under the right called A, a defeasance clause, B, anticipatory repudiation, C, statutory right of redemption, or D, equitable right of redemption. Plenty of C's in the chat box. Good enough for me. It's actually going to be D. So let's sort out what the difference here is. Statutory redemption occurs after the sale has been finalized and is recognized only in states that extend the right of redemption period to include the period after the sale. Equitable redemption occurs prior to the finalization of the sale. So that's going to be your primary difference here in what type of redemption is being executed, right? So the key here and the key on these questions on your exam will be whether it's happened before or after a sale has been finalized. Question number 7, Sally and George, a married couple, have elected to buy a home. They calculated their PITI is well within the qualifying housing ratio percentage. What does PITI stand for? Is it A, principal, interest, taxes, and income, or B, principal, income, total debt service, interest, C, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, or D, percentage of loan, interest, total annual income, and insurance? It is C, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. That'll be your total PITI, is including all of those things. Question number 8, a lender advertises that there are reasonable monthly terms available for the purchase of a home. Which disclosure is necessary? Is it A, interest rate and interest paid over the life of the loan, B, monthly mortgage payments, C, no disclosure is necessary, or D, what the interest rate is? All right, got a fresh set of C's in the chat box, and that's correct. Because there is no disclosure is required because it's just a simple and vague phrase of reasonable monthly terms. Disclosures are required effectively when any numbers are involved, right? When you start throwing around interest rates or monthly payments, basically you start throwing around any number, you got to throw around all the numbers, right? That's the requirement there. So if you're just saying like, hey, competitive rates available or reasonable rates available, reasonable terms, for buyers, that doesn't require any upfront disclosure. But if you're like, 2.99% interest rates, well, are they fixed rates? What do I have to do to qualify, et cetera. Question number 9, a viable alternative to foreclosure would be A, filing an attachment, B, filing a lis pendens notice, C, a deed in lieu of foreclosure, or D, filing a writ of execution. C is going to be correct here. A deed in lieu of foreclosure is where the owner hands over the deed in lieu of being foreclosed on. It is exactly what it sounds like, and that is a viable alternative when foreclosure is on the horizon. Question number 10, all of the following statutes require the disclosure of closing costs except A, RESPA, B, the FCRA, Fair Credit Reporting Act, C, Regulation Z, or D, Truth in Lending. Which one does not require the disclosure of all closing costs? All right, we've got plenty of B's in the chat. And that's correct. The Fair Credit Reporting Act regulates the collection of credit information, doesn't really have anything to do with closing costs or any disclosure therein. The balance of them do. So that's that. All right. Keeping this train rolling, we'll hit some real estate calculations and then see where we're at to maybe hit one more after this. All right. If the loan value is 80% and the property is appraised at $95,600 and sold for $98,000, how much would the purchaser be permitted to borrow? So we're going to do a loan to value ratio of 80%. All the A's flood into the chat box, and that is correct. So the trick here is knowing that loan values are going to be based off appraised value, not sales price. So 95,600 times 0.8 is 76,480. If you put in 98,000, you'll get an answer that will show up here, and it will be the wrong answer, right? So just remember that loans, banks have appraisals so they know what to loan on, right? And they're not going to loan on what things sell for. And that's why in this market, you see a lot of contracts written with appraisal gaps and a lot of contracts written, you know, to say that they, or some are written to say, hey, if this doesn't appraise, I'm going to walk away, because their loan opportunity is going to be based on that appraisal value. A mortgager had a $67,000 loan at 5.5%. What would the new principal be after the third payment of $325? Monthly payment of $325. So I'm going to go ahead and work through this one, as these can be a little bit gummy. So this is a multi-part question. So the first thing we want to figure out is, what's the annual interest required on the loan, right? So these numbers are in annual form right here. So a $67,000 loan, I'm going to multiply by 0.055 or 5.5%. So there's $3,685 annually that'll be due on this. So I'm going to divide that by 12 to get it into monthly interest payments, because I got a monthly total payment. Now the total payment is simply the interest payment and the principal payments. You're paying down the principal and you're paying interest, right? So if I look at this and I say, all right, it's a $325 payment, and I'm going to back out the interest of $307.08, means I'm paying $17.92 each month on the principal. So I'm going to go 3 months in. So I'm going to multiply that principal, the part that's going towards principal, times 3, which is $53.76. So then I go back to the 67,000, and then I back out the, what was that, 53.76? and that's going to give me $66,946, right? And some change. So the key here is figure out the annual interest, figure out the monthly interest, figure out the monthly principal, back out the monthly principal for the number of months, right? And if you get on one of these questions and you're stuck or you forget how to do it, look for the opportunity to eliminate some questions or some potential answers right away. You can't always get 2 of them knocked out, but there's usually one. Like if you look at option B, right? It says that $1,025 or $1,050 has been paid off of the principal. Well, that's going to be pretty hard to do when you've only paid $975 in total payments, right? So, in the event that you get to this and you forget what Mike said and you forget the steps, remember, part of it is getting the questions right that you can get right and then stealing a few. And stealing a few comes down to giving yourself the best odds. So that right there takes you from a 1 in 4 to a 1 in 3, right? So a 25% chance to a 33% chance, right? And you do that enough times, you pick up an extra question here and there. Question number 3. A parcel of land described as the southwest quarter of the southeast quarter of the northwest quarter of section 13 sells for $500 an acre. What's the sale price of the property? Is it A, $10,000, B, $40,000, C, $5,000, or D, $100,000? All right, looks like the C's have it, and there you are. Among the things that you just got to know, right? Like the only path to getting this question right is to know that a section has 640 acres, right? And so again, you get in, you sit down on for the exam, just jot down the things that you need to know, get them out of your head and onto paper. 640 acres in a section, 43,560 square feet in an acre. The superintendent appointed by the commission runs the division, whatever it is that you feel like you need to remember. And then it's simply, you work through 640 divided by 4, divided by 4, divided by 4, gets you to 10. And then that 10 times 500 gets you to 5,000. Question number 4, a real estate agent presented an offer in which the buyer asked the sellers to pay half of his escrow fees and 3 points. The sellers accepted the $195,000 for the home, and the buyer's going to put $55,000 down. How much will the seller pay for the buyer's points? A, $4,850, B, $4,200, C, $5,430, or D, $6,400. All right, substantial amount of B's in the chat, and that's going to be correct. So the key here is to know that points are only paid on the loan amount, right? Points are only paid on the loan amount. And so we take the 55,000 down, we back it out of the 195 sale price. That gets us to $140,000. In this case, a point is 1%. So 1% of that's 1,400. 1,400 times 3 is $4,200. $4,200 is the correct answer. Now, you may see this same question. You may see this same question, and it would ask you, how much will the buyer pay for the points? And that's sort of a trick question, because if the seller accepted the offer as written, the buyer will pay $0. So just be on the lookout. Don't get too far out over your skis when you see this one. You just start jamming through. Remember, every time you see a math problem, you want to really focus in on the words. What are the questions being asked? Because that's an easy one to miss. Easy one to miss when you get to, you're moving through the questions pretty fast, and then you assume that you're calculating points when really the answer is 0. A real estate transaction fee of $1 million on the sale of real estate at the total consideration of $63,500 is equal to A, $6,350, B, $63.50, C, $6.30, or D, $635. All right, seeing the B's in the chat. That is going to be correct. Oops. That is going to be correct. When you see mills, just divide by 1,000. 1 mil is equal to 1/1000 of the consideration. Wow, this is the same question again. That's really weird. Real property transfer fee of 1 mil. You guys just answered that. Good job. Hopefully that happens on the exam. All right. Mr. and Mrs. Boyd are approved for a loan of $85,000. Their monthly payments will be $9.75 per $1,000 for 30 years. How much interest will they pay over the life of the loan? A, 170, B, 426, C, 213, or D, 476. Which one is that gonna be? Couple C's in the chat box here. We'll go with that, and that's correct. So this is a good, another multi-part question. So the first thing we want to calculate is, what's a monthly payment, right? So monthly payments are $9.75 per $1,000, right? Okay, so I've got an $85,000 loan, and divide it by 1,000. So there are 85 1,000s and 85,000. Yeah, you guys know that. Times 9.75, which means on a monthly basis, $828.75 is my monthly payment. Now I'm going to multiply that by 12 to get my annual payment. That's $9,945. Then I'm going to multiply that by 30 years to get $298,350. Now I promise you it's not this way on the CompuCram, but that number will be an answer on your exam. But you are not done, because that is the total paid. But they have paid $85,000 of principal. They've paid the $85,000 loan back. So they've actually paid $213,000 in interest. Question number 8, a real estate agent has written an offer in which Luke, the buyer, asks the sellers to pay half of his escrow fees and 3 points. The sellers accepted the $135,000 and Luke's going to put $40,000 down. How much will Luke pay for his points? Is it A, $2,430, B, $2,850, C, 40,000 or 4,050, or D, 0? Well, we could go ahead and look through this and figure out what a point is. It's going to be, $95,000 on a loan. 1% of that, 95,000 divided by 100 is 950. There's 3 points. Okay. 2,850. But wait, the seller has agreed to pay his 3 points. So the answer is 0. The answer is 0 because Luke will pay nothing for his points. The seller has agreed to pay that, 2,850. Question number 9, a property sale will close on April 30th, 2010. The taxes are $1,575 per year and are paid through the last half of 2019. Calculate the seller's share of a 365-day tax year. I'm going to walk through this one because I feel like we haven't had one of these in a while. So what are my keys here? All right. So I'm paying for the seller's share. So the seller has got to pay last year's taxes, if there are any, and then all the taxes for each day that they have lived in this house this year. And don't forget, the day the property closes goes to the seller, right? So that makes it easier. So we know they're paid through the last half of 2009, paid through the last half of 2009, which means they're paid up through 2009. So the only days in consideration here are from January 1st, 2010 to April 30th, 2010. And all we do is count the days. Well, there's 31 in January and 28 in February and 31 in March and 30 in April. So we have 120 days. So then I know I'm in for 120 days. What's my daily rate? 1,575 divided by 365 equals 431 and some rounding. So I'm gonna multiply that by 120, and $517.81 should be the seller's share, right? Because that is the portion that they have lived in the property. Now, these get tricky and you got to pay attention. If they're only paid through the first half of 2009, you got to go back to July 1st, 2009, which starts the second half of the year, roll those days in with the rest of the deal. And if you can always just count on your fingers for the dates, or you can remember that there are 181 days in the first half of the year and 184 in the second half of the year. And I know that doesn't make them really two halves, but that's just the way that it is. Question number 10, a property is valued at $115,000 and is taxed at 40 mils. The assessment rate on the property is 35%. Go ahead and calculate the yearly taxes. A, $1,610, B, $16.10, C, $32.20, or D, $161. All right, as the A's start to come into the chat box, that is going to be correct. So when you see assessment rate for properties, you'll want to make sure that you are multiplying that by the property value. Sometimes you'll see it as an equalization factor. Sometimes it says, hey, the equalization factor is 1.25. Well, multiply by 1.25. When you see that there's an assessment rate of 35%, you multiply by 0.35. Then you're going to divide by 1,000 because you're in mills. When you see mills, you divide by 1,000 and then multiply by the number of mills. And that's what you did here. And that's how you 10. All right, gang. We can do one more small section. Let me think of what's a small section here. You know what we don't do very often is leasing and property management. So let's go ahead and hit that one just because it's a quickie and it'll take us to the top of the hour. Where the hell is it? Is that even a section? Am I making that up? There it is. Sorry about that. All right, so this should be about 5 easy cues. All right. If a tenant pays a landlord on a regular basis and occupies the property for successive intervals of time, the tenant would most likely have which of the following leaseholds? A tenancy at sufferance, B, a periodic tenancy, C, a tenancy at will, or D, an estate for years? All right, B's made their way into the chat, and that is correct. That is going to be a pretty solid definition of periodic tenancy. Question number 2, what type of lease would you expect the property manager to negotiate during periods of high inflation? A, an index lease, B, a land lease, C, a net lease, or D, a fixed lease? All right, so we got some B's, lots of B's in the chat. We'll go with that. And the index lease is actually going to be the one preferred by the landlord because that's where you would be able to increase the rental rate based on the inflation rate, right? So, you know, you guys are unlikely to encounter any of these in your dealings and your transactions, but that indexed piece is just, it's indexing it against the inflation rate so that, you know, if inflation goes up 10% for 2 consecutive years, that landlord is going to be, you know, paying an additional 10% each year on a lease amount that is not inflated. So the index lease is going to allow that rate, that rental rate, to inflate in line with, it's indexed to inflation. Which of the following would you expect a property manager to do for the owner of a property or the owner of an apartment complex? Property manager with A, draft leases for tenant signature, B, rehab and convert properties for a condominium, C, list the property for sale, or D, initiate action for the recovery of rent. D is correct. All the other ones would not be in those. Listing the property would be what a sales agent would do. Rehabbing it would be what a contractor does. And drafting leases is something a lawyer does. Property manager can't do it. That's unauthorized practice of law. Suppose the owner could do it as well. All right, question number 4. A property manager is instructed not to show a property to married couples without children. Don't show the property to married couples without children. A, this is not a violation of the Federal Fair Housing Act. B, this is a violation of the family protected class under the Federal Fair Housing Act. C, this is a violation of the Federal Fair Housing Act. Or D, this is a violation of marital status protected class under Federal Fair Housing. So what's going on here? Don't show the property to married couples without children. Don't show the property to married couples without children. All right, go with D. And it's actually going to be A. It's not a violation. So the Federal Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination based on familial status, i.e. people with children, Marital status, however, is not a protected class, and no discrimination has taken place. The question is centered around the understanding of the 7 protected classes. Again, marital status is not a protected class. That's a really bad question. I'm just going to say that that's a really bad question because the absence of children or the presence of children are both discriminations on family status. So yeah, that's just a bad question. I'm sorry. Question number 5. A lease begins on September 13th and ends on December 31st of the same year. What type of leasehold estate has been created? A, estate for years. B, periodic tenancy. C, tenancy at sufferance. Or D, tenancy at will. All the A's in the chat, and that's correct. Periodic tenancy begins on a specific date, ends after a specific period of time, a month, 12 months, 2 years. And so this estate for years starts and ends on specific dates. Good job, guys. All right, ladies and gents, that is going to take us close enough to the top of the hour for us to call it a successful session today. Again, if you have scheduled your real estate exam, your test, or your retake, please let me know what date you are in for. If you have sent down a application or a retake and it has been longer than 2 weeks, I'm putting the telephone numbers of the Ohio Division of Real Estate and the PSI Testing Center. If you have not heard back from someone, please let me know. And then also please reach out, as you will find that if you can withstand being on hold for a bit, you can get through to someone and you will be in a position to do it right there online. So if you haven't heard anything, you're like, wow, Mike, you sent my application down in January. What the hell's going on? Please reach out to me and I will get that sorted for you. And then from there, we'll keep on rocking in the free world here, and we will we'll get you up and running as soon as you pass the test. Alonzo, let's go. Big day tomorrow. Good luck, my man. And then anybody else who is testing, let me know and keep me posted on the outcomes, guys, even if things don't break your way. Good luck Wednesday, Stacy. If things don't break your way, let me know sooner rather than later, so that we can go ahead and get you geared up for a retake. The key, guys, is to get back in the saddle as quickly as possible, so that all of your hard work pays off. And you can build on whatever momentum you had going into that first test. Because I'm telling you guys, if don't get down on yourself. Number one thing, don't get down on yourself, because if you hit some skids, and maybe you don't pass on the first try, you will be among the majority of people. And the key is to get right back in there, because I know some people on the call who have missed. You're not missing by a mile. You know what I mean? We're talking you're missing by, 3, 4, 5 points. Couple questions break your way, little upgrade on test taking strategy. You're going to be in a great position to succeed the next time you get in the room. So fingers crossed for everyone going this week. If you guys need anything, if you're struggling with anything, you want to shoot me an email about anything, my email going in the chat box right now. Otherwise, we will see you next week. We'll likely be moving this out to Tuesday because on Monday night we are doing our monthly career night. So that'll be Monday at 5:30. All of you guys will have participated in that. All are welcome if you want to come back and hang out with us again. But we will send an updated communication out about this being on Tuesday. It'll likely be on Tuesday for the next couple of weeks because of the President's Day holiday on the 21st as well. So we'll get all of that situated and fixed for you guys. Actually, let's see if we're going to be able to do it on the. Let's see if we're going to be able to do it on the 21st. We might be able to pull it off on the 21st. Might have to be a little bit earlier. Might have to be. I'm actually traveling. I'm flying that day, so I'm not sure how I'll be able to do that. But keep your eyes peeled for emails from me. And as always, guys, if you have any questions, I'm here for you. Okay. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your week. And for those of you testing, good luck. See you guys soon. Have a good one.